Hey everyone, it's Kai, and today we're going to be covering some of the bigger tournament results that happened in Japan over the weekend, so we don't lump them in with all the local results on Thursday. Basically give them some more coverage and an idea on what is basically happening at these like higher risk events, I guess, higher stakes events. We got two events. The first one is the Goteichi Sampan VGCS, and the second one we have is the over the BVFL Kashiwamae tournament. Both of them were team tournaments, which are kind of different. In Japan, they love their team tournaments. In the West, not so much. But basically, with these team tournaments, you can't have any nation overlaps. So you have to take, for example, if you take a Bastion, you can't take another Keta Sanctuary deck in your team. You have to take something else. You can't take like Hexa Orb or Phantom Blast Drag or things like that. So that's just something to consider. In terms of what the overall representation was, if you add it all up, Bastion was 20 players? No, 23 players brought Bastion. Well, 23 teams brought Bastion out of 24 teams for the Goteichi Sampan VGCS, which is what we're going to cover first, which means is a lot. Basically, everyone took a Bastion except like one team. While Bruce was like the second most represented, that one was 20 people brought Bruce, and then it kind of drops off from there. Simply because your other choices in that nation, like for Keta, you know, if you want to take Hexa Orb or PBD, they're not as good compared to Bastion, and Bastion is pretty much just one of the better decks. Especially like the second set Bastion, where there's basically no changes to the deck, or the changes to it are very, very low, like very low rarity changes, and basically everyone has a Bastion deck. And then the same thing with Bruce, right? Your other Dark States deck is Barrow Magnus, but I think it's generally agreed upon that Bruce is just superior to Barrow Magnus anyway. When you look at something like Prison and Orphist, where both decks are relatively good, then you've got a big shift there where, you know, both decks will be highly represented. But in terms of, you know, Bastion and Bruce, kind of the top dogs. All right, so let's take a look at the decks now. So the first deck here we have showing here is a Bruce deck piloted by Esse, which was who's actually a very well-known player as well. We've seen his quite a lot. This deck is quite unique in that it's running 7 draws and no crits. So 7 draw, 4 of the new fronts with the 20k fronts, and, you know, 4 heals with 1 Dark States over trigger. And he's also running 3 Colossus, which is kind of strange. You know, a lot of people have faced out Colossus, but he's decided to go with a very high grade 3 lineup, the 4 Hell Dives, 4 Bruce, 4 Marjorie, and then, you know, somehow fitting this in, right? Fitting this in. The draws are very interesting. Normally you'd want crits because, you know, crits are just better, but 7 draws kind of can help maybe your early game where you can take a lot of damage and then get a bunch of draws that will, you know, beef up your hand, and then you make a huge follow-up turns. And hopefully when your front triggers, your 20k fronts can kind of save you. Fronts plus nulls, a combination of that can save you. In terms of record, he went 5-2-1, so he won 5 of his games, he lost 2 of them, and he had a draw. And the draw was just because it looks like on the final game, it was a best of 3. He won 1 and he lost 1, but then probably his teammates all won, so he just didn't bother playing. So overall, it's like a 5. He went X2, which is kind of like alright, I guess. And well, just a spoiler as well, his other team members went X2 as well. So overall, in a tournament like this, you know, going X2 is good enough, I guess, at least for standard. So it's not like these changes really affected his run like a lot. And in terms of Japanese Bruce decks, I do think this is one of the more unique ones that we've really seen. So yeah, pretty interesting. Second place was a Bastion deck. Now, this is probably the easiest Bastion deck you will ever have to build, right? I've said it before, if you have a Bastion deck right now, you're pretty much laughing them away to the bank. You just, with him, you put in the fronts, and you put in 2 of the new order. You didn't even run 3 of the new order. I know, like, just the real question that everyone's asking is how many of the new order do we run? And this player, this is Mushikonas, I think. He's still running one of the old order, simply because this requires basically, this is no restriction, right? The Holy Hour of Judgment has no restriction. It's just CB2. While the come forth, like form up guys, I think, still has like a four grade 3 unit restriction, so you have to actually commit stuff. Not committing is pretty good in this current meta, and apart from that, you know, the rest of the deck is just straightforward. He went X2 as well. And then lastly, the interesting deck that we have is Overlord. So a lot of people looking at this Dragon Empire slot going, you know, do I play Nirvana, do I play Eugene, or to play Overlord? There's generally only, I think a lot of people would be saying, you know, Nirvana is correct, but Overlord was piloted by Miltai, which is also a well-known player. Yeah, this, I like to say I kind of like this deck. As a lane player, I like this deck, because he's running 4 of the grade 2 order, which is just, you know, you just sit there. Like overall, the deck is kind of just does its thing, right? You know, triple drive, two Vanguard attacks a turn, sit there, beef up, get your Persona Rider return Tenchestead, and then yeah, beef up with all this defensive power, right? No draws, 20k fronts, 15k orders, and yeah, just bash people like that. Make sure to use your Nahalem to give the 5Ks, spread the 5Ks around a bit as well. So I think it's an okay deck. Not exactly the most fun deck, but if you want to build, at least it's not as bad as Phantom Blaster Dragon. All right. Moving on, in second place is we have an Orphis deck. So this is running the Istillate Dragon? I don't think it's Istillate Dragon. It's Cardinal Fang Istillate. Yeah, it's not a dragon. There's no dragon. It's an eagle. It's an eagle. But yeah, this has been showing up in the locals seen quite a bit, and it kind of it's popped up here as well for the Orphis. Basically, during each player's end phase, if your world is in Abyssal Dark Knight, both you and your opponent choose one of your own regards and retire them. But of course, you get free regards, so it's less of a problem for you and more of a problem for him. He's running 2 of the old retire order as well. So with this Istillate Albadine, Arubideld, whatever it's called. But yeah, between these 3 cards, you can basically control down your opponent's field without really investing much, while you still generate a field. So you're basically 1-for-1ing, except they don't plus as much free shadow tokens as you do, so eventually you'll win. So yeah, that's an interesting Orphis deck. Next one, we've got a Bastion deck again, still the same, except this guy's running the Prideful Dragon, which you definitely do not need, but he's running 3 of them. So yeah, he's not running any of the orders. This is basically his draw power. But do remember, I know a lot of people read this wrong or don't play it correctly. You have to have 4 grade 3 reguards. You have to have actually super committed to the field. And I mean, in a singles tournament, I guess this is not very good. But in teams where, you know, only one team can bring a Bruce, so you might be up against a lot of random other decks, then you don't have to worry about committing, because, you know, only one of the players on your opponent's team will be playing Bruce, and that might not be your opponent, right? So you can play something more like this and not have to worry about it. And then lastly, in the second place team, we have the Magnolia Decks. And I think some of the cool thing about the Magnolia Decks now is they're running 4 of the Coochies, right? And they're also running 4 of the movers, right? The movers is Ujura, I think. And yeah, so you just commit Coochies on the field, move them away, commit more, move them away, etc, etc, which is kind of funny to see. You know, 15k grade 1 base. Third team, we have another Bastion. Again, very standard. This guy's running 4 of the order and then 4 of the fronts, but the rest of the deck is just all set 1. He's also running a Bruce. This one is a much more traditional Bruce. You know, 3 draws, 4 crits, 4 fronts. I mean, some people, it's either like the lineup is usually you change the draws for fronts, or, you know, if you really want draws, you can replace some of the crits for the fronts, because overall you're just gonna mass heaps amount of power with the hell dives and then just mass attack, and then at the end you kind of can do some Proto Ball plays with Leonards, etc, etc. But this is kind of the build that Japan has really settled upon. I don't really think we're going to see any more innovations on this kind of deck. for the time being from them. Maybe we'll see some from the Western scene. But I think, yeah, in general, we've just been seeing this basic deck. No Edens, only 4 of the Leonard. And I mean, some decks still run Eden. They just cut some of the other junk. But then we've also seen things like Mabel. But overall, the entire core of the deck is pretty standard like that. And then lastly, on the third place team, we have a Prison Deck. And again, this one I think is pretty standardized now. You know, you have the Bug Motors, the Rouges, all being, you know, great cards in the deck. Rouge making big like defensive powers. A Bug Motor making everything work. You've got your Turquoise here making everything, or just make the whole deck work as well. You know, when they call things from the prison, it just feels bad. And then they just run the Violet for defensive power, and then they run 3 of the Order, X of the Order now for just the offensive kind of removal from hand. Just put on, but this is the core of the deck. Like this is just pretty much there. It's pretty much there. This is basically the Prism build that we're seeing. And then in the 4th place team, we have the Bruce, and again, it's similar to the other list that we've seen so far, but he's actually managed to put in some Edens, running a list of the dogs. List of the dogs, and yeah, like if we just compare it, right? This one was able to fit in presenters. That's how he's able to fit in the Edens, right? And then the second, this one actually brought in a Nirvana deck, and he's running Aruna for his kind of more pressure. I think people have mentioned that, you know, if you boost a Trickster with Aruna during a Persona Ride turn, that it's 28, which is a pretty good number. And yeah, 28 is a pretty good number, but even just without a Persona Ride, it's 18. It's a pretty good number, and then it turns into a 20 column hit with an Urger. So the Runa's pretty nice, especially in teams again where you're not afraid of committing, because you might all be playing against that matchup where you will have to be afraid of committing, right? And then, you know, he's still running the Valientes, still running 4 of the Firenas. So overall, pretty decent. He's running no Damaris for that multi attack, but I guess, like, the theory behind it is you either commit one way or the other. You either commit with the Damaris, or you commit with just high-powered columns. And the Aruna does let you kind of go earlier and then put on pressure earlier. So I can see why Aruna is kind of just a better choice for that at the moment. And then lastly, for that team, we have another Bastion, which is kind of what we know now. And then this Bastion, again, very straightforward. New fronts, new orders, you're done. Right. So that was basically the first tournament. Then we have the second tournament, which is the over the BVFL Kashiwa Mai tournament. This had 32 teams instead of 2024, but lots of Bastion representation. That was the highest. 27 teams took it, and then Bruce was 24. So 2/3 of the teams took, well, not 2/3. Sorry, this even has the percentage. 75% of the teams took it, and then the next is just a tie between Seraph Snow and Orphist, which is pretty interesting. But again, like I've said before, both of these, both are very strong archetypes in the Brand Gate meta, and it's not gonna be so dominating compared to before. Now onto the decks, right? Onto the decks, we have first place team. This is Sikigami, I think, running the Prison Deck that we've seen. You know, 4 of the Order, but the rest of the core is still there. Skateboard Man at 4, the draw. And then this second played a Bastion, and again we're seeing that similar kind of 2-1 split where you run 1 of the Cometh Order and 2 of the Fallout Order, and then the rest of it is kind of pretty standard as well. And then third place was the Bruce, and this Bruce again still pretty standard Bruce. This one's running 7 crit 4 front and no Edens, but just the 4 Leonard. He's able to fit in the Mabel. This is the tech that we've been talking about before. It's basically just CB1, get another drive check. So CB1 for a +1 is pretty standard, but you know, since it's a drive check, it is better, slightly better than just a +1, right? Then the second place team, this one was brought by Hanamaru playing Bastion. Oh, sorry, their second was Yun. Third place was Gen playing the Bruce. Yeah, and then second place team, we've got Hanamaru here playing Bastion, running the Painkiller tech, which is just kind of the you can boost early and then pop it away so you don't lose to Leonard. But then he's also running the new Raphelsis, which is, I don't know, I still don't really like this card, but it's one of the better cards to be released from the second set.
I mean, you've seen a lot of Bastion lists already to know that it's probably not needed. And then, you know, 4 fronts and 4 cometh. I mean, not 4 cometh, the 4 order, form up order. The second was, is it the Keeper of the Night Sky? Is how you translate that. He's got basically your standard, nearly your standard prison deck, except he has a lot of alternate rarities. But he's running 3 of the Limon that really doesn't contribute much to the deck. I've seen people still like running the Limon, but you don't really have anything that really abuses the Limon's extra kind of prison tech. So not really agree with that, but yeah, the core of the deck is pretty much there, although it's kind of a mess. It's just, there's so many different rarities. And then third place is East Cloud. I think that's how you translate that. It's just a Bruce deck, running 1 less Hellblast from before. 3 or 4 is pretty much where it's supposed to be at, but you know, because he's only running 3, he's able to fit in the Eden, like 2 of the Eden. And then, you know, he's cut it some dogs, right? Then in third place, well, but top 4, we have Core playing Bastion. This is just pretty much a standard Bastion list, really, but he's run extra order. He's run 2 comeths and 3 form-ups, and yeah, it's pretty much it. Then we've got Melon, You Buddy Melon. That is a Kantai collection meme. Is running Seraph Snow. Yeah, it's a very standard order. 4 of the hand order, lowering the grades you count. I actually like this count better. You know, the 4 order count, and then 2 of this guy. Just it's pretty cool, right? I'm with my list, I ran 4 of the defensive order, but you know, I want to try this one out. And then we have Motoma with the Magnolia, and we're seeing the 4 Kuchi and the 4 Mover, and that's pretty much Magnolia right now. You know, put in the Dama Inaru, and then, you know, put in the 4 Kuchis for Ursula, put in some elephants, deck's done. Yeah, I put in Wild Intelligence as well to fish out the Kuchis and the Ursulas, and you're done, right? So very kind of, I don't know. It seems very easy, but at the same time, it's kind of funny how this your field is just going to be a bunch of green dogs. Right, and then the last team, we've got Seraph Snow again. Lower order count here, but the rest of the deck is just pretty much the same. You know, it's pretty much like lowering the order count plus the violets. Yeah, and then their second was Bastion. A very standard Bastion list. I think I've said, you know, very standard Bastion list quite a lot of times now. But I feel like Bruce and Bastion are pretty much their entire cores are just figured out, and pretty much Seraph Snow as well, right? So basically, like the top 3 decks are kind of just figured out, and that's what everyone's just taking to these team tournaments. And then the last deck of the day we have is just a Bruce, and this one is kind of figured out. He's kind of sacrificed 1 Helldive, and like, yeah, it's just 1 Helldive for one of the 20k Bruce orders. We have seen this defensive order pop up a few times as well. I've seen quite a few lists running like maybe even 2 or more of this just for the 20k shield when you're on Bruce. But then he's able to fit in, like, you know, he's sacrificed some acrobats. You know, he's cut down this part to add in 2 more Edens, which is something that's been happening. So overall, I think, yeah, a lot of the decks have pretty, well, top 3 at least. Well, people regard, you know, Seraph Snow, you know, Bruce and Bastion. Like, Bastion and Bruce basically fixed. Everyone regards them as the top decks. The third deck has kind of been weird, but overall we're seeing a lot of Seraph Snow representation in the top 8s, or the top 4s, I mean, which kind of maybe cements it as, you know, the third deck, and that one is also pretty figured out as well. But then, you know, I think still the Orphis decks are quite strong. That one we've seen less of, but, you know, there's still some variations there, and the Nirvana deck still hasn't been figured out. So that part of the mid tier, I guess, or the high mid tiers haven't been figured, and the rest probably, you know, there's still people innovating with that, but not topping with it. But I guess in these kind of builds, there's not really much choices. When, you know, you can't take Kedar out because it's just Bastion, and you can't take another one. So yeah, maybe we're waiting for some single tournaments, but overall Japan has been pretty, I guess, pretty, you know, they've figured out their builds
Now it's probably we're just gonna wait for the West to maybe do some innovations or maybe cement these builds. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video, right? Bye.